The last chapter of One Piece ended on a very intriguing note, with Dr. Vegapunk about to reveal something special about the Will of D, but he got cut off, and all we know is Mo. Well, that's not all we know, actually. You see, a beautiful thing about Japanese is that there is a lot of hidden meaning depending on how characters are written and when they appear in sentences. So here's what we know about the Mo. Thing number one, it's not going to be an English word, which I bring up because a lot of people are throwing around suggestions for words that start with Mo in English, like Mo or Monarch or Monkey or Mother Flame. But if it was an English word, then it would have been written in katakana, not hiragana, because katakana is the alphabet for loanwords. And just to show the difference, because they are deceptively similar, the one on the left is hiragana, and that's the one that was used in the chapter. So there's two ways we can go with this. Either Mo is the beginning of a new Japanese word, or Mo is being used as a particle. In Japanese, particles are single characters used as markers of meaning in sentences directly connected to other words. A very common one being no, which denotes ownership and pops up a lot in series titles like Boku no Hero Academy or Shingeki no Kyojin, My Hero Academia, and Attack on Titan for those of you not thoroughly enweebed. But in this case, Mo can be used as a particle that broadly speaking means also, which would mean that Vegapunk's message sounds like, among you there is also, and then he gets cut off. And this is the idea that I currently subscribe to because it's the most vague and tantalizing thing that Oda could have done, which can lead to pretty much any explanation one wants to put forward. A very easy one right off the bat is that Vegapunk was saying something like, among you there is also a Joy Boy, or a new Joy Boy, or one who has inherited a will of a Joy Boy. Something along those lines, because Vegapunk has all but confirmed that with his own eyes. He's seen Luffy and Gearfifth and he has marveled at the glory of the Sun God. However, rather notably, this message was recorded before the Straw Hats arrived at Egghead Island. So that could be why Vegapunk is still being this vague, because at the time the message was recorded, he didn't know which of the D-wielders had the will of Joy Boy, and so he could only impart that much information. I'm not sure if I like this idea though, because yeah, it would be a revelation for the in-world characters, but it's pretty mundane for all of the us that are reading. As readers, we already know that Luffy is the modern Joy Boy, so this would be a bit of a boring cliff to leave us dangling off, and Oda is usually a master of making these reveals just as shocking to the readers as they are to the characters in world. So then we move on to thinking about what could surprise us, which is maybe Vegapunk saying something more like, among you there is also a traitor. Something to sow intrigue within the members of the D-Clan and pointing to a hidden history where one of their own condemned the great kingdom to its fate. And while I think the answer to this one would also be fairly obvious as well, because it would clearly point to Blackbeard and also Rocks, who have been the traditional enemies, but it would still leave the intrigue of exactly what the Marshals or the Rocks did during the Void Century and what their mission is to this very day. And this also ties into the second linguistic option. The Mo might not be a particle, it may be the beginning of a whole new word. And the reason why it's written in hiragana is to not give away the kanji which would give away the word. One word of which to be proposed is mozo, meaning imitation or fake. So Vegapunk could be saying, among you there is a fake, a pretender, which again very much points the finger in Blackbeard's general direction, although it would be fun if he was a real D and the fake was someone else. And I think we could be in for a long debate with this one. Again, I'm incredibly curious to see how Viz translates this, because that could end up changing quite a bit. They are able to ask Shueisha clarification questions, so I'll keep you up to date with that, and also up to date with what the native Japanese speakers are thinking. I got blue balls from the ending of the chapter. I think that's a very common feeling, not me personally. My balls are still very much their natural color, because I loved this chapter, but then I went online and I found a very different sentiment. And I guess in Sydney we do have a term for this. It's called getting off at Redfern. Redfern being the last train station before you hit the city, so it's often used to describe the action of pulling out, arriving early, or stopping before, how shall we say, completing the task, which is what Vegapunk did in this chapter, and many readers did not appreciate it. And I don't know, maybe I'm just conditioned to this. I've been reading One Piece weekly since 2005, so whenever something like this happens, I have no expectation of it happening to completion, if that makes sense, because I know what Oda's like. He's going to tease and flirt all up in your DMs, but then when it's finally time to meet up, he is gonna ghost you. I think this had to happen though. Vegapunk can't just go and reveal everything because it would be stealing a lot of Robin's thunder. It's very much going to be her honor and duty to tell the story of the lost history, probably including the Will of D as well. I get that it's a bit annoying, but look at it this way. The less we know about the mysteries of One Piece, the longer the journey has to continue to find them. The last time we saw Don Don Krieg and Geen was around 24 years ago. That's a long time. But yeah, the last time we saw Don Krieg was in chapter 67. And very appropriately, the very last shot we got of him was his ass. We don't even see his face. This was his goodbye to the series. And that may be why Don Krieg is generally remembered as ass. But that means that the last time we saw Don Krieg was, get this, 1,050 chapters ago. And even more mind-blowingly, in real-world time, the last time we saw Don Krieg was in late 1998. A lot of you probably weren't even born when Don Krieg departed. So it's not 24 years since we've seen him, it's closer to 26. Which I think now makes Don Krieg, Geen, and Pearl collectively the record holders for longest time between appearances in One Piece. And really, there's only a handful of characters that could ever hope to take that record away. The main one in my mind being Captain Kuro, who despite appearing one more time in the anime, never reappeared in the manga after his Syrup Village defeat. And look, I know that Vegapunk's message, it might be over, it might not, but it might be. But after seeing Don Krieg, I can't help but wonder if there is a chance for one tiny Kuro panel as well, just to wrap things up neatly. Something I didn't mention in the chapter review is that I love Krieg's Zonga hair because it's a throwback to his Glory Days bounty poster, which I still think is genuinely one of the coolest bounty images in One Piece. So I do think it's a solid marketing maneuver to readopt this aesthetic. And one more Krieg thing that may or may not blow your mind, which I'm dumping here because I don't know if I'll ever have an opportunity to say it elsewhere. There is a very solid idea floating around that Don Krieg is related to Sai, as well as a native of the Kano country in West Blue, because they look extraordinarily similar. But also Sai is now known as Don Sai, because Don is the title given to the leader of the Happo Navy, much like his grandfather Don Chinjao. The idea would be that Don Krieg is like an estranged uncle of Sai and he was deemed unfit for leadership, and so he started his own navy and took the title of Don for himself. The one issue being that, like I said, the Kano country is in West Blue. However, the earliest thing we know about Krieg is that he was a prisoner who took over a marine ship, so maybe he was caught in West Blue and transported across the Calm Belt to East Blue for reasons. I don't know, but I do think it's a cool idea. Ethan is Kitetsu. I also think this is a cool idea. Saint Ethan Baron Venus Jiro is partially inspired by Gandhi aesthetically, but he clearly has heritage in some sort of Japanese-based fictional pirate culture, the primary source of which is Wano, but there are others. And assuming the Five Elders aren't some sort of satellite creations of Imu, which we still can't entirely dismiss, because they do all seem to share that common power. However, assuming that that isn't the case, then these old men all had to come from somewhere, and I think it would be pretty damn cool if Ethan was originally the Kitetsu himself, and he was corrupted into joining the world government, and that may even be the reason why swords made by his descendants are cursed to this very day. I want to be clear, I don't think it's very likely at this stage, but it's something to maybe just keep in the back of our minds. That or the Kitetsu was once a fierce rival of Ethan, and they had the OG battle to crown the world's greatest swordsman, like how Joy Boy was the first pirate and everything. You forgot the cover page. I didn't forget, there was just nothing to say. We're now 7 installments into Yamato's pilgrimage around Wano, and the pilgrimage still hasn't begun because almost every interesting character on the island lives in the flower capital. Seeing Nekomamushi again is nice, but otherwise it's just more of the same. How did Law not notice lost sieves in his submarine? My guess would be that it's because it's too dark. Even Frankie's nipple lights were powerless to illuminate the underworld of the sea when the Straw Hats were briefly there, so I can't imagine Law's submarine doing any better. And there are probably also limits on just how far the polar tank can dive as well. Just being able to dive doesn't mean that you are equipped to handle the water pressure of going all the way down to the sea floor. In this world, metal is not enough for that. You need like a very special bubble that you get from somebody. Am I mistaken that Kujaku on page 2 confirms that Garp was alive and recovering but wanted to be left alone? No one is talking about this, so I guess I'm mistaken. You were, but don't worry about it. A few people were confused by this, but they're actually referring to Drake because he is the captain of Sword. And as it is, Garp's fate is still unconfirmed. Although I referred to him as lost in my last video, which many people took to mean that I was saying he was dead, that's also not the case. I meant it more in the literal way. They lost Garp on Hachinosu because that's still where he is and not with them anymore. I think it's incredibly unlikely that he's dead though. Drake recovering from wounds in One Piece and in real life. Yeah, it's not an amazing time to be any kind of Drake. But speaking of wound recovery, something interesting that was brought to my attention is that Drake is still likely recovering from his Onigashima wounds. I mean, unless he fought someone else along along the way and that person like really messed him up. But it's probably the Onigashima wounds, and it's like, what's the holdup, mate? Characters like Zoro got infinitely more injured during Onigashima, and he's already up and fighting leopards and centaurs and stuff on the future island. I guess Drake didn't have Chopper to attend to him, but it is a fun shonen manga disconnect. Drake is in the position that all of the Straw Hats should be in, but because there's a story to happen, certain characters get magically recovered. Surprised you didn't point out that Smoker is carrying a box with him, lol. So that's because I didn't even notice. I was far too excited about the concept of ocean biking to look behind it. But on reflection, Smoker is indeed pulling something behind him, and the cube shape could indicate a poneglyph-like object, but I feel like it might be too small to be a poneglyph. But then again, I don't know how much I should really be trusting scale in One Piece anymore, because I spent about 5 minutes in the last video talking about swords radically changing size. But whatever our Smoky boy has here is likely the mission he was sent to complete, the question now being who sent him and why sent him of all people. I have to imagine that this is being done without Sakazuki's approval, because I don't see Sakazuki trusting any important missions to Smoker alone, just due to their differing opinions on justice. But yeah, you let me know in the comments, what do you think Smoker has? Could be an error, but notice Blackbeard is drawn with complete upper teeth. Coincidence? Yeah, I knew something was off about this panel. Sometimes Blackbeard just looks wrong, and it's usually whenever he actually has teeth. Blackbeard is one of the most inconsistently drawn characters in One Piece. He doesn't seem to have any specially designated teeth to remove, and it seems more like Oda chooses at random whenever he gets put to page, and there's even one case where Blackbeard was drawn with a perfect full set. Broadly speaking, there are 3 different teeth structures that you'll see with Blackbeard, which has also led to what is known as the Marshall D teeth theory, where there are 3 different Blackbeards potentially inhabiting one body, and the only way you can tell which one's in charge at any given point is to look at the teeth. But then again, we also know that milk restores teeth in the One Piece world, so maybe Blackbeard just has a habit of getting knocked out and then drinking a lot of milk, gets teeth back and knocked out again, because he does tend to take a lot of damage in battle. On screen, Blackbeard is a bit of an underwhelming presence in combat, with most of his major victories taking place off screen, so maybe his face is a bit more fragile than most, and the dude just can't get enough milk to keep fixing said face. I'm slightly disappointed about the Iron Giant being able to do nothing to defend the broadcast. What are your thoughts, internet people? To be fair, this is a very old robo-giant who just woke up from a long sleep and immediately got assaulted by a very big pig, so I don't think that any of us would be doing particularly well in his position. But what interests me a lot more is that Marcus Mars identifies this as the Iron Giant who attacked Marijois 200 years ago. He's very certain of this fact, which has now reopened the question of exactly how old the 5 elders are. Unless they have detailed history books or some other sort of visual evidence of that day 200 years ago, there's no way they could be this certain unless they saw it for themselves. Which is curious because during Wano, the way the elders spoke about Luffy's devil fruit was as if they weren't part of the world government for the past however long it's been, whilst the fruit's been all elusive. But this may be confirmation that the elders are at least 200 plus years old. Going back to the Iron Giant though, I don't think he got one shot like a lot of people are claiming. Remember, One Piece, it's a weekly manga. We read it 1 chapter a week, and fights generally span more than 1 chapter. So this is one exchange. The Iron Giant, he got hit. It was a pretty hard hit. Hard enough to disturb the broadcast equipment within him. But the giant itself, he seems pretty fine. He's fairly intact and just having a bit of a lie down. Although, to be fair, that's a worry. It took so much time and effort for him just to get up the first time. But I would bet, some quantity of cash money that the Iron Giant isn't done yet. Sure, it's unlikely to survive this encounter, but I feel a sacrifice incoming. A sacrifice to make things right in order to protect the Joy Boy today that the Iron Giant failed to protect the yesterday. But I also think we should note this moment. I think we're probably going to set sail from Egghead and probably not learn a whole lot more about the Iron Giant. But eventually, we'll get a flashback which recontextualizes this whole event. Like the Bartholomew Kuma stuff. Throughout a lot of the series, the dude just rocked up and did a thing. It was confusing and then we moved on. But then, at the right time, which was recently, Oda relentlessly unloaded a tragedy oozy into us that is the Kuma backstory. And it has now made every moment we've seen him in the series prior hit incredibly hard with a distinct bittersweet flavor. That's how I anticipate feeling about the Iron Giant in the future. We don't know his story now, so now he seems a bit underwhelming. But when we do, this moment on Egghead is going to retroactively destroy us. And there's also some hope on my side that there is a bigger plan here. I noticed that War Curie seems to have blasted through and potentially exposed the front of the Iron Giant. And look, I'm just saying, it would be pretty fun if there was a camera in there as well, ready to film all of the 5 elders shoulders and expose them to the world. Because at the moment, apart from a bit of extra credibility, we're still kind of waiting for the idea of Vegapunk's message being a video to pay off. At the moment, there hasn't really been anything that really needed this to be visual. Although honestly, the biggest reason why I think the broadcast might still continue is because York was so relieved that it was over, and mate, I desperately want to see her reaction to Vegapunk screwing her over one last time. And if you want to stay in the loop about all of the things that are happening, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel for consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed.